Ensure the weather is set to be dry before starting this stage. The first part of Stage 3 is preparation of the bandage and reinforcement mat. Roll out the matting across the entire roof. Note that the mat has a straight edge and a feathered edge. Cut the mat to size using a Stanley knife and roll out the next row of mat with the feathered edge overlapping the straight edge of the first piece by 50 mm. When cutting the edge pieces of mat, keep the mat away from the face of the edge trim to prevent the finished laminate from overhanging the front of the trim. When all rows of mat have been measured and cut, re-roll each length and keep them in order on the roof for use later. Prepare the bandage for the perimeters where the trims meet the deck. All joints between trims and preformed corners, and trims with mitered corners should have a strip of bandage cut to cover them. Prepare smaller lengths of bandage and place over. Cut 150 mm by 100 mm strips for corners where the A200 trim meets the B260 trim. Use masking tape to bridge any gaps between trim joints and corners. The bandage preparation is complete and ready for the resin to be applied. The next stage of the process is the mixing stage. Use a cement mortar mixing tray as a bund for decanting and mixing of resin and top coat on the roof. This should be placed on a flat area, ideally off the roof if possible. Seal cans when they are not being used. Do not mix resin on the roof without a mixing tray. Uncatalyzed resin spilt on the roof can generate an odor which can be almost impossible to resolve. Ensure that you wear latex gloves and safety goggles when using resin, and always have eye wash available as a precaution. Using the lid opener tool, open the can of resin and mix well for 30 seconds with a slate batten before pouring the resin into a Curid mixing bucket. Start with 1 meter square for detail and tissue work. Take particular care when handling the hardener. Always read the handling and storage instructions and safety data sheet before use. Wearing safety goggles and gloves, pour the hardener into the safety dispenser. Roofing resin and top coat requires a hardener to cure. Using the hardener addition chart on the side of the mixing bucket and factoring in the decking temperature and ambient conditions, measure out the required volume of hardener using the safety dispenser and mix thoroughly into the resin using a slate batten for at least 30 seconds. Set aside a dedicated area for wetting out the bandage using a spare piece of OSB board. Take the smaller lengths of bandage that have been set aside for corners and detail. Ensure the bandage is saturated with resin and transparent. The bandage can then be carried to each detail on the roof and laid over the top. Lay the bandage strips over any joins in the trim and in areas where two trims join together. Take the square piece of bandage and lay over the end of the A200 and B260, ensuring the whole void including corner is covered. After a minute, the resin will saturate the mat and it can be molded to shape. Using a brush with a little resin, dab away from the corner, pulling the bandage tight and down to the bottom edge of the drip trim, making sure the bandage is saturated with resin and doesn't contain any trapped air. The bandage strips can now be applied to where the deck and trim meet. Use a 3-inch roller to apply the resin mix with hardener to the deck and trim area. Lay the strips of bandage on the wet deck and coat with resin. It is important to paddle roll the strips of bandage. While the resin is still wet, offer the detail tissue up to the corner. Use a roller to shape and finish the corner work for a neater corner look. Stage 3 is now complete, and all bandage detail has been applied to the roof.